2XKO just dropped a trailer for Vi, the Piltover Enforcer, a longtime crowd favorite champion, especially after Arcane, and one of my personal favorites to play back in the day. And good lord, she has never looked better. Her animation and gameplay so immaculately captures that feeling of brute aggression and explosive power that made Vi so fun to play in top lane. But then something weird happens near the end of the trailer. Vi spends her entire ult cinematic punching off screen.
She's such a misfit, always ready to brawl. It's like her business, roughing up your friends. The law, there is no difference.
So what the heck is actually happening? I have a guess, but I want to make it clear that this is not a defense. The cinematic in its present state has excellent animation that is otherwise ruined by this odd framing and editing. What I am presenting is a possible explanation for how things turned out this way based on animation concerns, as well as some evidence from similar situations. Normally I'd say to get the obvious thing out of the way, but Vi has already done that for us. We can't see her opponent. Fight choreography is a two-man act, and the actor on the receiving end of an attack has just as important a job to play as the actor performing it. As a form of visual storytelling, fight choreography emphasizes clarity. Every attack should have a clear cause and effect. Attack A leads to outcome B, and you don't get the effect half of the equation if one fighter is not being seen. I know I sound like I'm pointing out the obvious, but good fight choreo is one of those things that's difficult to appreciate because we kind of just assume it's supposed to be this way. We only really realize how important it is when the things that make good choreo are just not there. So how did an animation team as talented as 2XKO's team miss such a crucial element of choreo? Well, I have a theory. Choreographing cinematic super attacks for fighting games comes with a unique challenge: composition, framing, and variability. The same cinematic that works against one character needs to work against all characters. The reason this is difficult is because a fighting game cast may have characters of wildly different sizes and proportions. So the same cinematic sequence that works on a medium-sized humanoid also needs to work on the smallest and largest character you have. And that's where 2XKO runs into a potential problem, because most fighting games can comfortably assume that all of their characters are humans with a human arrangement of 4 limbs. But the source material of 2XKO is League of Legends, where there is a wild variety of non-humans, and the discrepancy between League's smallest champions and its largest is ridiculous compared to your average fighting game. How do you assure that the same cinematic sequence is going to work on Teemo as it would on Blitzcrank? And if 2XKO ever gets a real grappler, things are gonna get really complicated if they need to grab a limb. When you add a character to a fighting game, you need to consider how this character interacts with every other character in the game. Every single character Capcom adds to Street Fighter VI needs to have reactions to every single critical art, and that list is only going to get larger the more characters they add, which means the workload per character just gets exponentially bigger over time. The more efficient thing to do would be to pre-rig a single animation that works across the board for all characters no matter what size they are. But if you were to just drop any champion into these sequences, you run the risk of positioning being offset, characters clipping into one another, or the worst possible outcome of a large champion blocking the camera. Just think about any critical art performed against Abigail. So to ensure that just never happens, the practical thing to do would just be to crop the opponent out of frame entirely. And you might also notice that most other Ultimate Cinematics in 2XKO try to interact physically with the opponent as little as possible. The only exceptions are Darius and Echo, because their ults only require an opponent to use regular in-battle animation for hit reactions. So why didn't they just do that for Vi's ult? I don't know, maybe it was a staging issue. They should have just set the camera to POV so it looks like Vi is attacking the camera. I agree, but Yasuo's ult already does this, and if that were the solution, then we'd have a bunch of ults attacking the viewer directly, and that might get weird after a while. So how come Guilty Gear Strive can do unique reactions per character? Because Arc System Works are freaks! The groundwork they lay down for their character animation allows ARC's animators to push and pull every individual vertice and polygon into their desired shape. And they do this on every individual frame of a cinematic. It is beautiful, and it still remains as the most gorgeous animation you'll ever see in a fighting game. But is it time efficient? Probably not. And yes, I know that the current lineup of 2XKO only has regular humanoids, so this problem doesn't really exist. And yes, based on champion popularity, the most likely champions to get into 2XKO are going to be more regular humanoids. But based on how Riot builds their games, I do not think Riot is building 2XKO like a regular fighting game. If it is anything like League, Teamfight Tactics, Legends of Runeterra, or Valorant, 2XKO needs to serve as a platform that Riot can simply inject more and more content into. There is no upper limit for what Riot can add to 2XKO, so they need to lay down the groundwork to make it even possible for a weirdly proportioned champion to be in the game. Call it a silver lining, but this might be the solution they landed on to future-proof the game to be able to handle weirder champions. And if this sounds like a bunch of bullshit, maybe it is. I don't work at Riot, and I don't know what their pipeline is like. But what I can say is that I've seen similar situations in a few other games. In its third and final season, Killer Instinct added Ultimate Combos, the game's cinematic finishers that you can close a match with when the conditions line up. However, some of them are framed a little strangely. Most of them never actually show the final hit, and some of them that involve an intricate physical interaction also seem to push the opponent out of frame. Part of me thinks that this is to avoid the game getting an M rating. They already tried to dodge the M rating before when their vampire character Mira used gray blood instead of red. But it's also likely that certain characters in KI are just too big. Season 2 gave us Aganos, and then Season 3 gave us General Ram, Idol, and Gargos. Characters who are so large that the regular in-game camera has to zoom out just to accommodate them. It's possible that the choreo or camera work for Ultimate Combos just broke if they tried to keep these characters in frame. So the solution would naturally be to crop them out. Then there was Soulcalibur 4, which had a mechanic called Critical Finish. If you reduced an opponent's soul gauge down to red and then broke their guard, you could perform a critical finish that ends the match immediately. Soulcalibur is typically pretty good about making animations for throws and finishers work for characters of any size. But Soulcalibur 4 had one odd character in its roster: Yoda from Star Wars. Yoda was a character who already broke most of the game's systems. He couldn't be thrown by grabs or attack throws, most highs and even some mid-attacks just went right over him, and you can bet that combos just did not work on him either. So when you performed a critical finish on Yoda, each character instead had an alternate animation where they just performed a few regular moves and called it a day. They are as disappointing as they sound. I need to stress again that this is not a defense. 2XKO had something really cool on their hands that was utterly botched by this baffling editing choice. The production quality and presentation of 2XKO has consistently been this game's strongest selling point, so I'm not willing to just assume that this was neglect or incompetence. Game animation is a complicated craft with many different hands involved and many moving parts. This kind of thing just doesn't happen by accident. Vi is one of my all-time favorite champions, and thanks to Arcane, I'm willing to bet she's a lot of people's favorite too. I just want to know why they did my girl dirty like this. So in the middle of editing this video, the 2XKO Twitter suddenly drops this onto my feed. It's a reworked cinematic for Ahri's ult, and it looks good. It actually addresses the problems I had with her old ult cinematic. There's also a clip of what appears to be a new cinematic for Echo, and his also looks really good. And while it's nice to see these new cuts, I think this actually touches on something that not a lot of people might realize. The soft launch of 2XKO later this year is still technically not the full version of the game. It's an extended early access. This means that this is the time period in which this game is at its most malleable. If any big sweeping changes are going to happen, it's going to be during this period. And like a lot of extended early access projects, this also means tweaking and updating the presentation over time. And changing a cinematic is actually extremely efficient since it makes no functional difference in gameplay. So what does this mean for Vi? Could they update her cinematic during this extended phase during launch? Could they update it after launch? Did they solve the problem of ambiguous champion sizes? If they didn't, did they develop a better sequence that doesn't push the opponent out of frame? Why did they drop Vi's trailer with this current cinematic? Is it a placeholder? I don't know. But what this does reinforce is that nothing right now is set in stone and anything is likely to change. And I hope they do because, man, this ain't it.